already delved into on the CEDS website. So I'm going to hand it over to Nancy Copa. And I should have introduced myself. I'm Jackie Hughes. I'm on the CEDS team. And I'm going to hand it over to our director, Nancy Copa.
Hello, welcome. And we are super excited to be having this webinar today around the CEDS Ontology. This was a labor of love, if you will, with the entire community. It was a big undertaking to move from the Domain Entity Schema to the CEDS Ontology, and a huge thank you to the community, in particular to those folks who participated in the Ontology work group that was in fall of 2024 through early 2025. You all helped design all of this and what we're about to go through today. So if we can go to the next slide. Why we're doing this is the part that I wanted to talk about, is just a little bit around what's happening, why. CEDS, and I know there's going to be some more on the next slide as well, but it was originally designed when folks, technology, all of that was around more storage-based thinking. And now with the advancements in technology, certainly with AI, it's more around meaning-based, right? How are these things related, and less strict, like tables, columns, rows, that kind of thing, and more about relationships. So if you can go to the next one. When CEDS was started, it was back in 2009. So that is 16 years ago now. Hard to believe, but thank you to everyone who was in the original back 16 years ago. When the first round of CEDS came about, it was necessary to display it in some way that was easy for human consumption. This was kind of a new concept. It was around standards, everybody having the same definitions, right? Still, I mean, it's still about that, obviously. But at the time, we were basing it on design principles from 2009. And so we had the Domain Entity Schema. It was fantastic if you were brand new to CEDS, because it was very easy to say, oh, I'm a K-12 person, let me go through and I want to look at K-12. Oh, I want to look at the students. Let me see what kind of elements are there. And so it was very nice for the step-by-step walkthrough. Over time, though, we expanded the technologies associated with CEDS, and we have the integrated data store. We have Align and Connect, and the states were bringing up about how, like, putting their data dictionaries and mapping via Align, how it doesn't quite map up, because that's not how they have their data stored. They don't have it as a database, a table, that kind of thing. It's being stored in different ways. And so that's when it was time to start taking a look at, is there a better way to be displaying the standard? So that's when the community decided to move towards an ontology. And this webinar is not really so much about what is an ontology, but rather kind of the unveiling, if you will, of the new display on the CEDS website. But I will briefly just say that ontologies make it much easier for really doing the contextual pieces. Dwayne's going to walk you through several examples, looking at the DES and like thinking through context and what was there, context human consumption wise versus computer consumption wise, and then looking at the new ontology itself. So if you'll go to the next slide. The one example I do want to just show is, if you can think back to the DES, which is what we've been using, there's a lot of duplication. There's one element, there's first name, but it is duplicated quite a bit. So if you had first name in your system, and that's all you had, it was first name, then you were having to align to multiple different instances of it. You were having to align if it was a student, but even further than that, and I know it's not shown on the screen, was the student K-12. Were they post-secondary? Were they adult learning, etc.? Now, then there was parents, there was staff, all of that. Now with the ontology, and that's what you're going to see now coming up, is that first name exists one time. There's not all these different ones. Instead, there's relationships that are built there through the system, so that systems can distinguish those people by the roles instead of having 16 instances of first name. First name exists one time. It exists for a person, and then the person may have different roles associated with it. They may be a K-12 teacher with a child in early learning, while also getting their degree, their graduate degree in post-secondary. So they've got 3 different roles right there, but they still only have one first name. And so the ontology depicts that much better, and all of those various relationships among it. So just wanted to give you kind of that background there, so that we're all on a level playing field with this. For the remainder of the time, I'm going to actually turn it over to Dwayne. He's going to kind of walk you through some of the terminology, and then start to show you with live demo about the how it works on the CEDS website now. So Dwayne?
Thanks, Nancy. So I'm going to go through to kind of help you understand the ontology structure that we have for CEDS, so that you'll better understand what you end up seeing on the website once I start bringing that demonstration up. So there are major components that we have with the ontology: our classes, subclasses, the object properties, the data properties, the concept scheme, and named individuals. So I'll go through each one of these to understand where they fit within the overall model. So a class first, and you can think of that sort of like a container or a folder that's meant to only hold certain types of information. The folder itself is defined. So if we defined it as assessment, you would put assessment information in it. There'd be assessment elements related to assessment information, properties related to assessment. If you wanted to put facility information into it, you'd be filing it in the wrong location, right? So think of it as a file folder. This should just contain the type of information related to that particular class. Expanding on that, we have subclasses. So subclasses, also a class, also the folder structure, but think of it as a folder within a folder. So if we think of an organization has a name, an organization has a website, but there are different kinds of organizations, like a school, an LEA, a post-secondary institution. They all have names, they all have addresses, they all have websites. So they're folders that can fit neatly within the larger folder because they are all the same thing. So all subclasses inherit information from the class. So if an organization has a name, a K-12 school can have a name. If an organization has a website address, then a post-secondary institution can have a website address. But we create the subclass because there may be specific information that we want just related to that. So for instance, a post-secondary institution may offer degrees, while an elementary school will not. So we have a school that does not offer degrees, and yet we're going to put that they offer degrees. Within that wouldn't make sense. So the subclass for post-secondary institution has degrees offered, and then the elementary school, which would be another subclass, does not. So subclasses are just really folders within folders. Now we get to the relationships that Nancy was talking about. An object property provides insight into how classes relate to each other. So if we think of the first one, it might be an organization. The second class might be location. And an organization has a location. And so the object property tells me the organization's in this location. We've created a relationship between two classes, and we've defined that relationship, that an organization can have a location. So you could also have other things that have locations, right? A facility may have a location, and then you reuse that location class. So there's opportunities with the relationships to build relationships and eventually start looking like a spider web of different things that can relate to each other. That's all done through the object property. Data properties, these are what you would be familiar with, if you're familiar with CEDS, as the actual element. So as Nancy brought up, we have the first name, we have birth date, we have website address, city, enrollment entry date, right? In the ontology, where data properties exist, think of those as CEDS elements that do not have an option set. So if it has an option set, we'll talk about in a second, but any CEDS element that would be a string of information, like a text string, right? Or might be a date. might be an integer, things like that. Those are going to be data properties within CEDS, and those live directly off of classes. So if you had a person name class, it's going to have first name, it's going to have last name, it's going to have middle name. The person name class would have that kind of information that lives directly off of it. So that's what we have for the data properties. And then finally, we have the concept scheme and named individuals. The concept scheme is a special type of class, so it still is a class, but for understanding's sake, we actually are listing the concept schemes under the properties tab in CEDS, which you'll see shortly, because you're going to just think of it as an element. So if you're familiar with CEDS, you know we have elements that have option sets and elements that do not have option sets. In this context, we have the concept scheme is an element that has an option set. And so if we thought of the element as race, or the concept scheme equals race, then there's going to be options for that, such as Asian, Pacific Islander, and various other different races that would be listed under that. Those are the named individuals within the ontology. And so anywhere we have a standard option set, those are classified as named individuals, and they relate directly back to a concept scheme. And because concept scheme is a class, you have to have the object property. So there's a class that leads to the concept scheme. So there's a class that may be called person, and then there's another class that may be called person race. So a person has a person race, and that person race has the concept scheme of has race, right? So they have that relationship that would exist between the classes, and then a class to the concept scheme to get to that named individual. So this is a model, but let's put some actual information into it to make a little more sense. So if we start over here with the person and we run to the right, we see that a person has a person name. So there's a relationship that exists between the person class and the person name class. The person name class is going to contain all the information related to name. First name, last or surname, middle name, generation code or suffix is all going to be in there. And then we see above that, first name is one of the data properties that lives within person name. If we make our way up from person name, we see a concept scheme along with the actual named individual. So this person has a tribal affiliation, and that tribal affiliation is Cherokee Nation. So Cherokee Nation is a standard option set for tribal affiliation. So that's the named individual for that particular concept scheme class, which is tribal affiliation. So a person has that. If we make our way to the left, a person has a membership. And person membership and organization, you'll see are like the three core components of the entire ontology. They are very core to the structure of it, because oftentimes we're talking about a person and how they relate to an organization. They're employed. They have a teacher. The teacher's assigned. The teacher's assigned to a course section. The student's assigned to a course section. All those are memberships. And then the organizations could be the schools. They could be the course sections, various different other organizations that a student could be a part of, or a person could be a part of. So they have a membership. And then we have a subclass above that, which is enrollment. And enrollment has an entry date. So we know that that particular student's membership is an enrollment, and they entered on that particular date. Above that, we know specifically another subclass of enrollment, which is K-12 student enrollment. So a subclass of enrollment is K-12 student enrollment, and there's an enrollment status date directly linked to the K-12 student enrollment. So we have three subclasses listed here. Ultimately, we're able to tell through these relationships that this person has a K-12 and student enrollment, and the enrollment entry date occurred on a certain day. Where, though, then membership takes us over to organization. So this membership has an organization, and this organization is a K-12 school, and that's a subclass of organization. And then for fun, I threw in has facility, because you can actually jump from facility to classroom, and then you got course section that can take you back to classroom. And so you could actually start to see this web start to appear where things are related. This person could be enrolled in an assessment. That assessment is being run by this organization. Competencies, credentials, all of these things start to form together to create the complete picture of an educational environment for a student or for a teacher or for a staff member. You're able to see the holistic environment with everything connected together. Any questions about that before I jump into the demonstration? We do have this slide here as well, which is a great reference guide for you, which lists basically the different types of classes, subclasses, object properties that exist within CEDS, and then a quick reference definition. So it might be useful to have that as you start to explore the CEDS website on your own. All right, we're going to now jump into the live demonstration, and those are always scary, but we're doing them anyway. Okay, so we'll begin. And as I go through the demonstration, feel free to follow along on your own computer if you have two screens, I guess. And feel free to ask questions, drop them in the chat, whatever you want to do. So the first thing I want to point out is that there's two ways to get to the ontology. The first one is under the standard. And this used to be called elements. So if you were used to heading there to search through the elements, it now takes you to the ontology. The second way is by selecting ontology under the data model dropdown. And in both instances, you arrive at the same place. But for the sake of keeping things familiar, people might have been used to going there to get to the DES or the search. People might have been used to going there to get to the DES. So we put them in both places. But in both instances, you're going to arrive at the same place. The second thing I want to point out is we recognize that there's going to be a learning curve. So we kept the legacy elements page under the resources tab. So from here, you can still access the domain entity schema for version 13. You can still access the version 13 element search page, and you can still access the various different previous versions. So the version 13 extend the file, which is the Excel. You can get back into all the different versions, the previous versions through here. We won't be updating this for version 14, but at least it gets you through this transition period to see how you're familiar with things. So if you can't find it over in here, you might be able to find it in here and then start to learn the back and forth and then understand the model a little bit better. All right, for this webinar, I'm going to grab this, and we're actually going to pull up the legacy, and we're going to have this side by side. Grab the domain entity schema, and on the left side, we're going to have the ontology page. We have something kind of similar to the domain entity schema. You're going to see that we have a search here on the left. We also have a search on the right in the domain entity schema. Both locations have a search option. The DES on the right has a folder structure you're used to seeing that divided everything by domain. And on the left, we have what we call quick links. As we built the ontology page, there were some classes that are more likely to be accessed than others. So if you look over here on the right, you got all of these classes. There's well over 400 classes, but you're likely to jump into this web through certain ones. And so that's what the quick links are for. There's the three foundational classes I talked about: the organization, the person, and the membership. And additionally, you're going to see some of the familiar, what were called domains in the DES. So you have assessments, you have credentials, you have competencies, you have facilities, you have learning resources, similar to what you would have seen over here, which lets you jump into the ontology in that way. So clicking on any of the class names in the quick links is going to let you view the subclasses and the properties related to that. So we're going to begin by clicking on organization. And you'll see on the left side, it lists the organization subclasses over here. These are all derived from an element that exists within CEDS called organization type. And so the property of organization type has these options. We turn them into subclasses because they basically describe what kind of organization it is, and they may carry over their own. If we scroll to the bottom of the screen here, we're going to see the subclasses listed for the organization as well. Most classes will not have subclasses. Membership definitely does. Organization definitely does. There are a few others, but most classes won't have it, but organization's obviously one that does. Now, remember that subclasses inherit all of the properties of the parent class. So if I come back up here to the top, these are the properties of organization that exist. And we're going to take a look at this right now. So I'm going to click on accrediting organization, and we're going to watch the properties and see what happens there. You're going to notice that nothing changed in the properties list. That's because at this point, up here at least, there are no additional properties added for this type of organization, an accrediting organization. But if I click on the adult education provider, notice what happens for the third property from the top. Right there. we've added an additional property. All the organization properties remain, but one specific one that's just specific to adult education provider was added into this particular set of properties. So adult education provider type. If I click, removed, right, comes back. So these may have additional properties related to them, but they're all going to contain the properties of organization. You may also notice, strangely enough, let's go back to adult, a large swath of early learning organization elements located in the properties list. What does that have to do with adult education, or for that matter, with any of these organizations? Well, as we've discovered, there is not an existing organization type for early learning in CEDS. In that element organization type, early learning organization did not exist. So therefore, all the elements related to early learning were placed in the base class of organization. There's presently a ticket in the OSC for this exact reason, to add early learning organization as an organization type. And when that goes through, then it'll become a subclass of organization. And at that point, we'll remove these properties from here, and they'll be placed in the subclass specific to early learning organization and be removed then from this particular location. All right, so we're going to take a look at the properties now. Taking a look at these, we're going to see, I'm going to expand out here for now. We're going to take a look at these, and we're going to see 4 different types of links. Another class that links from an organization. So if I scroll down here, we're going to take a look at location. You'll notice on the right of this, you see class location. This is indicated that it is a class that is another class that links to organization through an object property. Whenever you see class in the brackets, you know you're looking at this. An organization has a location, right? An organization has an organization calendar. An organization can have a calendar crisis. An organization can have an organization email. All of these are different classes, as you can see listed in to the right of it by showing the class right there. So from location, if we were to expand out, we can see that location also has a class, a location address, which expands out here. And if we expand that out further, you can see more information related to the location address. These are the properties that exist for location address, and there are properties that existed for location individually within that. So you can see the 2 classes are linked together. The next thing you're going to see in brackets is a data property. These are what you would be familiar with again in the DES's elements that do not have an option set. They're either text or date. So if we look at the address city, it's a data property. So it ends here, right? It's a string. It doesn't link to anything else. It's the final point on the end of this model where you have an address city that is just text field that's in there. A string is just text that can include numbers and letters and symbols in it. The third thing we're going to see is an object property, which is the concept scheme. These are what you'd be familiar with in the DES as elements that do have option sets. Now, this first link will sometimes drop down to the concept scheme. Okay, yeah, we got that. So jumping up to here, let me go to one of those. All right. We have organization identifier type, right? If we click this, wait, that's not the one I want to do. Down here we go, organization type. Organization type is the concept scheme. So if you look here, you see object property, concept scheme, right? These are the ones that do have option sets. And then we finally get to the class itself, concept scheme, which is the organization type. If we expand down to here, we're going to see the different organization types that exist within CEDS. So you have that is that option. Now, as nice as these technical details are on the right, where you can see those, they're going to be helpful for some people. There are also some people who felt like they clutter up the screen. So we provided an option to hide them by unchecking show technical details over here. It goes away. So you can adjust between seeing the technical details or removing those technical details. Another thing to point out is the version right here. Right now, only version 13 exists, but as new versions of the ontology are released, they're going to be added into here. It will default whenever you get to it to the most recent version, but you'll be able to adjust between versions to see those. All right, so from organization and location address, we've seen how to navigate from one class to another. I now want to take a look at the search. All right, jumping back up here, and we're going to bring this back to side by side. We're going to search first name. Let's actually go back to classes and search first name. And then over here, we're also going to search first name in the DES. And over on the DES side, as Nancy had mentioned, you can see first name, other first name, first name, other first name. All of those listed with all of the various different contexts they have, where you have a contact that has a first name, but for an early learning organization specifically, a contact that has a first name or an other name, but just for an organization or a K-12 organization or an SEA. So it's listing them over again. On this left side, we have person name and person other name. If we expand those out, we can see first name here, and we can see other first name there. They only live once within the context of the ontology. This normalization is basically what the ontology is providing for us. And normalization just basically means listing something only once if something that has been requested, this is something that's been requested for years actually by the community using the DES, especially for when they were doing mapping. So you would be able to search for first name either through the classes, which is what resulted in giving me the classes that contain it, or you could search through first name through the properties, which will give you directly the actual first name and other first name information found there. So this tells you where it's located when you search for it, and this can tell you what it is. So you can go through and get first name either way. Okay, now we're going to look at the classes tab. And for this, I'm going to expand out again so that you can see the alphabet guide on the right side. Again, it may seem a bit overwhelming at first, but it is a listing of all the classes, which, like I said, is just over 400. Each of these is like a folder, and we wanted to be able to provide direct access to every class, and an alphabetical list was the way to go on this. So remember, on the left, we have the quick links. Over here, if you take a completed spider web and then try to ask where did the spider start, you probably can't get an answer. So the ontology is like that, a web of all of the interconnected classes. With the quick links, we tried to find or indicate places along. Sorry, I'm staring at the chat. Don't look at the chat, Dwayne. With the ontology, it's web interconnected classes, and we tried to indicate places all over the web from where you may start, right? So rather than giving you or the beginning, like you may begin here, over here, over here, over here. And over time, we're going to actually can make adjustments to the quick links. So as we see, there's more classes that are most commonly visited or most commonly used or looked at or reviewed. As we start to see that kind of analysis, then we can add in additional quick links or remove some. All right, so if we expand out the first class accessibility feature, we see all of the related properties and classes just like we observed in the organization class there. All right, so I'm going to open up the assessment. Extended time duration, where? Because it's not a has. There we go. I'm gonna open up one that doesn't have option sets. So this is what you'd be familiar with the DES, right? So if you open it up, you could take a look, assessment, extended time duration. It has a definition. It's additional time recorded in minutes to complete an assessment beyond the standard duration. It has the technical details. It's an integer greater than or equal to 0, a technical name, a global ID, very much what you'd be familiar with when you were looking at the DES. All right, I'm going to go back up into here and take a look at accessibility feature again. And here we're going to take a look at the accessibility feature application type. And now this one, you're going to see that it has option sets. So again, we have the definition. It's an indication of how this accessibility feature can be applied. And then we have the option sets. It's either an accommodation, an administrative consideration, a designated feature, or universal feature. So these option sets, again, how you're familiar with it from the DES perspective, just in the ontology, we call them named individuals as far as the structure is concerned. All right, I'm going to go back up to the navigation along the top. As you can see, you can jump back to the A's, back to the classes, back to where you were at on that, but I'm going to jump back to all. And then we have properties here on the right side. So last thing we're going to do for this demonstration is take a look at the properties. So if you want a place where you're just looking at a full list of the CEDS elements, those with and those without option sets, the properties tab is where you would go. And it also contains the alphabet navigation here on the right side, where we notice that we need to add some properties into CEDS that start with K, X, or Z. because we have nothing in CDS that starts with KX or Z. So maybe we can give out some sort of prize for the community member who creates a proposal for an element that actually starts with KX or Z. And I think there'd probably be a special prize if you're actually able to use X. So that is basically the navigation for that. So you have the ability to search for anything within it. And one thing I would note is that when you're doing the searches, just remember the back and forth. If you want to search the classes, be on the classes tab. If you want to search the properties, be on the properties tab. And that search would work for you then there. Technical details, version, alphabet. Any questions about this at this point, or have any come through in the chat?
Wayne, there were 2 questions, but we've addressed those so far.
Nicely done. All right. With that, I'm going to hand it back over to Jackie to talk about some additional trainings and office hours as you start to explore the ontology more.
All right. Thanks, Wayne. Let me steal screen share here. Give me 1 second. You see my screen? It says I'm sharing. You see it?
No, not yet.
No?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sorry. Okay, yeah, thanks, Dwayne. So as Dwayne just said, a special prize, I'm not sure what that will be yet, for someone who creates a proposal. So if you find a bug or there's something that you wish that would change in the ontology, then we have a space for that. We have two things. So the first is submit to the ontology repository. And if you, kind of a show of hands, there's a lot of you on here, but if you've ever submitted a OSC ticket, that's our open source community in GitHub, for an element, just like put a thumb up or raise your hand. It's going to, thank you, CJ and Caitlin. I see a few hands there. Thank you for participating. It's going to be a similar way we do that. I'm going to pull it up real quick. So from the CEDS standard, this is our GitHub. We have multiple repositories. One that most people, I think, are probably most familiar with is the CEDS elements. But now that we're talking ontology, we have our CEDS Ontology repository, which is where we're going to ask you all, our community, as you find things that maybe you're going, this doesn't seem right, submit an issue ticket. So we can review it and communicate with you on how we're addressing the issue. We can also take, and if you're going, I like this, but I wish it did this. So we are capturing enhancements as well. Those can be submitted here, and you just simply go to issues, new issue, and you tell us your subject line. You could say bug if you think, or error if you think there's an error that you found. And you can just add a description there, and then you hit create, and it adds an issue to the ontology. This is for anyone to use. It doesn't cost money to create an account, but you do have to have an account or create a free account in order to submit an issue to the ontology repository. And then let me go back here. Other general feedback. Feel free to email us at ceds@amcorp.com. And if you want to put, like, in the subject line, ontology, or maybe you want to take a screenshot of something and say, like, hey, I see this, like, Dwayne, Jackie, do you mind taking a second to tell me if this is correct? Or am I interpreting this the right way? Throwing that in an email is probably the best way. GitHub doesn't allow you to just submit screenshots into a ticket. So utilizing email would be great. Any questions on that? I just walked you through a lot of steps very quickly, and I saw the chat going off and make sure.
Yeah, we have a couple of questions. One was about, excuse me, the ontology repository itself. Will version 13 be released there sometime soon? Dwayne?
Yep, we are planning on this week to actually push 13 through. We wanted to have everything tested for the website at this point, and I think we're ready to actually push it through. So it should be happening this week.
Great. And then the second question, Jackie, I'm not sure if next you're getting to the Q&A, but the second question will require, like, possibly going back to the ontology share screen from Dwayne.
Okay. So yeah, let me cover this and then we'll jump right to the Q&A because these are great questions coming in. So in case you didn't know, we're holding office hours. So maybe after today, you're going to dig around in the ontology a little more and you're going, hey, I want to show up to the office hours. I'd like 4 questions I'd like to be able to spend some time with the CEDS team to talk about. So please join us on Thursday. We'll also have some use cases ready to kind of walk you through, kind of similar to what Dwayne did today, to help everyone get familiar with the ontology. And then on Tuesday the 9th, I already saw Nancy drop this in the chat, but if you're curious about Connect and Align and wondering if you can jump right into old Align maps, what is it going to look like? Join us. We're going to cover the tools, CEDS tools, and what's changed since we've transitioned to the ontology. And then we have, again, office hours more focused on Connect and Align. But again, if you want to jump in on Thursday of the following week because you spent some more time, we welcome all questions. So thank you, Nancy, for dropping the registration links in the chat. And now I'm going to jump to those questions. So you all should have the ability to come off mute if you have a question, but we do have one.
I'll answer that one. There's
Thanks,
not
Dwayne.
documentation presently, though it probably wouldn't be hard to create, that goes from the DES to the ontology. We had to do this already ourselves. So we probably have the documentation behind the scenes somewhere anyway that gives you a DES element to its location within the ontology. So the short answer is no, we don't. The longer answer is we can certainly make something like that, and that probably would be useful to build. So I'll take note of that, and we can get something like that made. It shouldn't take longer than probably 30 minutes, if that, to build that. And then I suppose I could post it. Where would I post it?
In the repository?
We could post it in the ontology repository
I think I'll
and
post it in the
also under
docs folder.
resources.
In the ontology, yeah.
Any other questions? Comments? Need us to walk back through anything?
Nice job.
Alex?
I have a quick question.
Mhm.
So I recently tried to log into the CEDS system and I did have an account previously set up, but it had been a while since I'd logged in. And it kept popping up with an unable to log in notification. And I had a coworker also try to log in, and it had been a while since they too had logged in, and it popped up with the same issue. I did end up submitting a help desk ticket, but I had never heard back regarding it. Is that something that I should like send in an email to the email address that you provided? Or is this related to like the system not having maintenance or something like that?
Thanks, Mackenzie. Yeah, we received an inquiry last week, I believe, about or right before, last week, the break, that other folks were experiencing an issue with the username. So we have that, and we have a developer that's working on pushing that fix to the IES team to deploy to the website. But Mackenzie, if you don't mind sending an email to CDS@AEM Corp. I wrote your name down, and I see you're with SEPI, but that would be great. So I have your email address, and we can work on getting that reset for you.
Okay, perfect. Yes, I will send you an email. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question from June in the chat. The legacy system no longer gives the element details, so we'll take a look at that, get that added back in. It's not showing the element details, and the global IDs have changed with the ontology. It's pretty much they're the same, except they have a C or a P in front of them. But there are new ones that have been added, obviously, for classes and for object properties, which didn't ever exist inside the DES before. There were no global IDs for them, so they have additional IDs that have been added for those as well. But bringing over the other concept schemes, which are ones with option sets, and the data properties, those have generally just a P or a C put in front of them, and then that's the global ID still. which is why, again, the mapping that was talked about earlier will probably be relatively easy to do to get that over. So.
I see another one. Will there be recordings? Yes, we are going to record them, and we'll follow up with an email to everyone that's just even registered with the link, but we'll post the recordings to our CDS Getbook page, but we'll also follow up with an email with a link to those. And yes, Bill, you will get the, we'll post the PowerPoints to Getbook as well. Great questions. And then I see some comments from Greg in the chat.
I can send those also to CEDS at AM Corp, because I think they probably